people here. Yes, thank you, Sandra, for recording. So this event is our May Wellness panel titled Spirituality and Healing. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Natalie Zamora. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm an intern at the MCC, and yeah, this project has been my little baby. And let Sandra go ahead and introduce herself too.
Thank you. So my name is Sandra. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a second year business major, and I'm a student lead at the Dream Center.
Thank you. So this event is going to be based around spirituality, and religion also ties in there. But basically it's to learn more about spirituality and how one can heal and cultivate it, may it be tied to religion or not. This event is by and for BIPOC and marginalized communities as we continue to navigate as underrepresented students in SLO. And with that, Sandra can lead us to our next little section.
Awesome. Well, we'd love for the panelists to introduce themselves. If you can share your name, pronouns, current position, and if possible, we'd love for you to define what spirituality means to you. Anyone can go, any order.
I can go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Khondamir, and I am currently a graduate student at USF. I also work with Angelica. I'm a resident minister at the university ministry. And to me, spirituality is the a way of living. It's the kind of something that it's the essence of my life. I feel like it's the layer beneath everything that is going on in my life. So spirituality for me is sort of like the fuel that drives my life.
If the panelists can popcorn to each other so that we don't sit in silence, that'd be amazing. Michelle, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle. I'm a recent graduate from Cal Poly. I studied psychology. I currently work at a local daycare center, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And spirituality to me is kind of how I find greater meaning in this life and how I think I feel connected to other individuals, my family, my community, the earth, and kind of all like just an interconnectedness to my life in the world. Yeah. Popcorn to Erica.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Erika, pronouns she, they, el, any work. I am one of the program coordinators for the Multicultural Center, heading the Latinx and Indigenous initiatives. And spirituality to me also means just connecting with Mother Earth and being able to find also just meaning in this world and being able to be led by something else that we can't necessarily see, but maybe feel. And I will popcorn over to Sara.
Hi everyone, I'm Sara, she, her, ella. I am graduating in 2 weeks from USF with a major in Latin American Studies and double minors in Spanish Studies and Public Service and Community Engagement. So that's a pretty long title, but I think for me, spirituality is my connectedness to a higher being and how that dictates my relationships with everyone around me. And Angelica, have you gone?
I haven't, thanks. My name is Angelica Quiñones, she, her pronouns. I am the interim director of university ministry at the University of San Francisco. Spirituality for me is a deep connection with something outside of myself. And in many ways, I think of it as a relationship between the sacred and profane in its original context in its original definition, which would be like the tangibleness, right, of life to something that is greater and transcendent. and I think everyone else is gone. Right?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And before we get into the questions, I did want to say we did prepare a couple questions for the panel. We'll go by one, but feel no pressure to answer every single one. But if you choose to, we'd love to hear your voice. So with that, Nat, you can take the first question.
Yeah, so we'll start right away. So our first question is, what religion and or spirituality do you most identify with? Why? And were you raised with it?
I can go ahead. I identify as Roman Catholic. I do practice Catholicism. I was born into the tradition, but I would say into a very progressive Catholic family, which at some point was like, if you don't want to be Catholic, that's fine with us. But for me, I appreciate the ability that the tradition gives me to get away from the everyday through ritual. I am a cradle Catholic. It doesn't necessarily mean that I see eye to eye with the church all the time, but the church has given me a space to get away from the everyday and to have that moment of connection within ritual. And so that's why I stay within it, among other things, which we can discuss later.
I can go next. For me, I identify as a Muslim. And to be specific, I identify with the Islamic mysticism because I feel like not only I grew up as a Muslim, but I also sort of discovered Islamic mysticism as a way of being something beyond myself. You know, what I mean by that is Islamic mysticism allows you to experience other people's experiences, you know, whether you are Muslim or Catholic or Jewish or, you know, anyone. I feel like Islamic mysticism allows for that, you know, avenue to be explored. And that's why I fell in love with my religion, because it allows me to connect to other people outside of itself.
I can go next. Like Angelica, I was also raised Catholic. I had a professor a couple semesters ago identify himself as a recovering Catholic, which really stuck with me, especially because of the trauma that can be put on, like, especially queer people within the church. So I've been navigating that for the last couple of years, but I still would consider myself a Catholic. I actually just became my best friend's little sister's godmother this like past weekend. So that kind of has brought me back to the church a little bit. But I'm definitely still navigating my personal relationship with the church.
I can go next. So I identify as Coptic Orthodox. That's how I was raised, which is the minority religion in Egypt, but the majority of the Christians there. And similar to Sarah, I feel like religiosity, I think that's the word, religiosity, is kind of always ebbing and flowing, and I'm always kind of learning more about it and connecting, disconnecting, just trying to navigate it. But I definitely appreciate the church that I grew up in. It's very connected to my ethnic identity. It allows me to feel very connected to my culture and my family. And my heritage and all of that. So growing up, it was something that I kind of strayed from because I never really understood it and it always felt like a chore. But now that I'm older, I really appreciate the ritual aspect, the tradition. There's so much history attached to it. So I really am still navigating it, but appreciating it more and more, I think.
For me, it's taken a few years, specifically graduate school years, to be okay with identifying as both religious and spiritually. I also grew up with the Catholic religion, and so that was something that was always around me. Learned how to pray and part of retreats, and then went on to graduate school to become a resident minister. And in that time, I learned that it was okay to also identify spiritually with my Indigenous side. And so being a part of Danza Azteca for the past couple of years throughout undergrad and grad school has definitely opened my eyes to understanding that we're one with Mother Earth. And so like understanding that there's different ways of like having faith and having this beliefs of like something bigger than us has taken some time, but definitely that's how I would identify.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm excited to continue learning more about every one of you, specifically the challenges you endured throughout, I don't know, just with this identity, but also like the learnings you've had and all the positiveness. The next question is, do you recall a moment where you questioned your religious spirituality, your religion or spirituality? How did you navigate this moment?
For me, I think it was my senior year of high school. All throughout high school, I was really involved with our youth ministry at, I grew up right at the Mission Basilica of San Juan Capistrano, which I used to like hand out the pamphlets every like Sunday, like, welcome to the National Shrine of Mission Basilica. But it was really interesting because we had traveled to DC for like the 4th of July, I think. But we went to, I forgot the name of it, but in the basement, there were like a bunch of statues of saints and stuff, but it was the first time outside of like La Virgen de Guadalupe that I had seen the Virgin Mary portrayed as like other nationalities and stuff. So I like, they had an Asian virgin and a black Virgen de Guadalupe or Virgen. But for me, I was like, wait, like I hadn't learned about this before. So I asked my youth minister, and he kind of like pushed boundaries within our church. He was the first person who like introduced God as like a female entity. So he like was up front and he was like, you know what, like this was one of the ways that like the Catholic Church took over other countries and like converted people to Catholicism. And it was just part of like colonialism. And so when he told me that, I like started researching it a lot more. I struggled, honestly. Like I've always been really like devout to La Virgen de Guadalupe, especially like growing up Mexican in a Mexican household. So I think that was one of the first times that I questioned my own like relationship even with the Virgen de Guadalupe. And now I think that when I think about La Virgen de Guadalupe, it's more so like on a cultural side, not necessarily like religious. So that was one of the hardest things that I really had to face, where I was like, wait, like a lot of what I have been taught has been kind of a lie, or like actually just lies. But I think that was when I really like started distancing myself from the church and navigating what it meant to be Catholic, like for myself. Because that's when a lot of other things like me openly identifying as bisexual and like the pushback that I got from a lot of like religious people and even like people from my own church. I think the only people that I could turn to were like my friends and that youth minister that I mentioned. He actually got fired because like the priest was not happy about what he was teaching us like in the youth ministry. But that was definitely a really hard time for me to like really question whether I still identified as Catholic or not. But yeah.
I really appreciate that, Sarah. And similarly, I also I also had similar experiences, I would say. And what I want to say is there is a difference between religion and religious systems. And as I grew up, the religious systems were so there were people in these systems were trying to staple together religion and religious systems. And if you were out of that system, that meant they were trying to say that if you are out of the system, that means you're not, part of the religion. Whereas I loved my religion and the teachings, but there were a lot of things that I didn't agree with the systems. So I always felt like, oh no, I'm a bad religious person. I'm a bad Muslim, or I'm a bad X, Y, and Z, right? But for me, I thought that, what if I don't look at the people that are running the system now, and I just look at the original texts? I look at the original life of my prophet, original life, original Quran, and just see what it says, see what the original people of my religion said, and base my religion on that instead of people who are running the systems now. And those were the times when I was kind of like, when I was not discovering that part, I felt like, oh, I'm not a good Muslim because I don't agree with this system. That's when it really challenged my belief. And it for the good, because now I feel like I consider religion to be out of those systems. It's beyond that. And I also at the same time believe that we need to work with the system to fix it. And if we don't agree with the system, can we offer something that is better, right?
I loved that. Thank you for sharing that. For me, it's hard to pinpoint an exact moment, especially because I think I'm always questioning it. It's kind of a constant thing. But what comes to mind definitely is when I first went to high school. I grew up going to a Christian grade school. So between the church and my school, I was surrounded by Christians. So going to high school, I met people who maybe didn't grow up in a Christian household, who didn't identify with that religion. And kind of I realized, oh, there's more out there. And these are still really good-hearted, awesome people. And they didn't have that same belief system in their family. So that kind of showed me that there's, I don't know, I think when I was younger, there was always kind of fear of the other. But in high school, I realized that there are other options out there. So that was when I first started to question. But I think the way that I navigate it is and find comfort in it is just realizing that it's fine to be questioning, and I'm just human. I definitely don't know what really is out there. I don't think I'll ever know. I don't think any of us really know, but just being okay with that kind of uncertainty and just doing what feels right for me and what allows me to kind of find meaning in my personal life. And I think that that's what we're all kind of doing in this with our spirituality and our religion. So
I love that. Thank you so much. I just want to build on what all of you said. I remember very clearly the first time that I questioned my religion. I was pretty little. I can't remember what age exactly, but I remember asking, I think it may have been my grandma or my Nino, like why weren't women priests? I remember that was always my question growing up. Like, why couldn't women be priests? We used to be able to, like, you know, carry the Bible and take the candles like up to the altar, but we were never able to like be a priest. And so that was always like a question that I had. And as I grew older, I just like questioned why there wasn't like marriages of like the same sex in the church, and why like the people in my church were so like homophobic and had like all this hatred towards like this like topic, you know. And I remember kind of what Kanamir was saying, right? Like move away like the actual system and just like look at like what has been written. And so I would always like think in my head, like, you know, like my grandma and my mom were always telling me about like God's immense love and how he loves all of us, and just like that preaching of like this belief of like being loved no matter what, and just like the person that Jesus was, right, and where he came from and all of these things. Like I just always questioned you know, why the system became like such a difficult place like to exist in if you're not something that is like cis and white and straight. So that has always kind of been like what I navigate like in terms of like my religious side, like just not understanding you know, all the things that like are preached and then not followed. But yeah.
Oh, thank you, everyone. I have so much to say about this, but I'll try to not make it that long. First of all, I want to say to everyone that's here, questioning is absolutely healthy. How can you be sure of what it is that you believe if you don't question? Questioning gets us to the answers for ourselves. And I think for the development of faith, belief, spirituality, connection to a religious tradition, it's constantly evolving based on what is happening in your life, you know, what age you are, you know, challenges that you might face, good things you might face. And so questioning is absolutely healthy. And I think sometimes those of us who are members of communities of color have been raised in families where questioning was not okay, but questioning is okay. So I'll start there. The very first time that I questioned my religion was in first grade. And it was to a nun in front of everyone. I said Noah's Ark wasn't real. I got put in the corner. My parents were called. It was a whole thing. My parents got mad, called the nun and said, if my daughter wants to question, then that is okay. Isn't that what education is for? And so then growing up, my parents really allowed me to question and to live those questions. But definitely growing up, going to Catholic schools, you know, I was taught a certain way, I had to believe certain things. And so there were different stages where I was like, I want to leave Catholicism. No, I don't. Different challenges that folks have mentioned. You know, as a woman, the priesthood is close to me. As someone who has loved working in the church since childhood, that's always been something very difficult to reconcile with. The church has also been in the middle of a huge sex abuse scandal, which has caused a lot of harm to a lot of people. And you know, how as a Catholic do I reconcile with that? But I think it goes back to Kundemir's point, right? What is a definition of religion? Definition of religion is a system of beliefs that connect people with like-minded ideas, you know, in a sense, right? And so we're talking about systems, right? Which is what, for me, the church is. And systems are often led by imperfect people. And those are religious systems, educational systems, healthcare, political, whatever, right? Systems are led by human beings, and human beings make mistakes. But at the very core of my religion and my spirituality is my personal belief. It is, like Kundamir said, going back to the text, right? And seeing what it was for me. You know, what is it that Jesus is teaching? Like, what are those central tenets, right? And then how do I want to then go and live my life, right? And so it's still a process for me of questioning. I'm very sure of my faith. Sometimes I struggle with staying in the church. The recent announcement that came out of the Vatican in terms of the blessing of same-sex unions, for example. It wasn't a new thing that the church was saying, but it was definitely something that for me, someone who has many friends in the community, was a difficult one, right? But at the end of the day, I stay because the only way to try to help a system to change is to work within it. And for me, my call as a Catholic and as someone who deeply lives for spirituality is to work to dismantle those systems and to work for social justice. And so that's how I think I navigate that. Like, what is the gospel, right, calling me to do? And that is to be a good human being and to love other people. And sometimes that might mean not necessarily falling directly in line with the system that I'm in.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. I appreciate that. I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and if anyone knows what that is, they're very strict about a lot of things. So going out into like the real world and realizing a lot of their rules didn't apply, or like I just didn't want to like follow it, I turned away from religion and spirituality for most of my teenage years. In the back of my head, it was always a thing because my parents are still both spiritual. And then so coming to that realization that Kundamir and Angelica said, you know, that systems and religion and spirituality are separate, like coming to that realization, that has helped me, you know, learn more about spirituality and learn more about what it means to me as like an individual. So I appreciate the advice that's already starting to be given, and thank you for that. So the next question is, what is your role in your religious/spiritual community? Is there an intersection between this role and the social justice issues that are happening today?
I can go first. And the other person that works with me wants to go first. As a resident minister at University of San Francisco for the past 2 years, when I started originally, I was always just like fighting the religious side of like who I am, because of all of the trauma that came with like growing up religious and queer. And then I remember when I met Angelica, who was my supervisor for the time that I was working as a resident minister, I was like, hey, like I am religious, but at the same time, like I'm really not. And I follow a lot of like indigenous spirituality, and I do dance Azteca. And like at that time when I was getting hired to be a resident minister, I had been a TA for a folklorico and danza class. And I had heard from a lot of Latinx students on that campus that there was like this need to like explore something beyond like the Jesuit Catholic institution that the students were a part of. And so I remember telling Angelica, like, let me do some programming, like, let me try to like, do something else that's like invite students to be a part of like something different. And I always appreciated that Angelica was always very open to saying, okay, like, let's try something new. Like, if you hear the students need this, and let's do this. And so I remember that like, I think it was a year ago now, it was the first time that we had Aztec dancers on our campus perform in like a big event for the university. And we got so much feedback from so many Latinx students saying that like they were very grateful that like they felt seen and heard and represented by like something different. And so through that, like I was able to have like conversations around like indigeneity and spirituality, and the fact that we can be both, that we can be religious and spiritual. Because I know that's something that a lot of like Latinx students were struggling with at USF. And so that's how like my identity of like both intersected in my role as a resident minister in that time. But even then, now that I'm at Cal Poly and like I have conversations with students as we were creating this wellness panel, like we had a lot of conversations around that it's okay to be both, right? And that it's okay to embrace both, and to understand that not all the bits and pieces like work. But like the social justice like component of everything that I was doing as a resident minister, it's just the way that that program was built, that there was a team specifically for social justice issues. And so through that, like being able to understand that through religion and spirituality, we're also able to do like social justice, like events and social justice programming that like relate and interconnect, because at the end of the day, like a lot of it does like interconnect with our intersecting identities. And so and that's how my role kind of intersected in both. And Kandamir, I know you were going to say something, so I'll pass it over to you.
No, I was just going to ask, because that question seemed rather long worded, so I wanted them to post it in the chat, but they already did it, so yeah.
I guess I can go. By the way, I love that my two resident ministers are here. Love you guys. My job is obviously intersecting with social justice. So there is something in the Catholic Church called Catholic social teaching, and sometimes the church doesn't do a really good job at advertising that. But it's all about justice issues, human dignity and rights and responsibilities as individuals to the community, globally, participation, call of solidarity with those that are struggling. And so university ministry, we work a lot on those issues, and we make sure that we are bringing them to the forefront, that we are fighting for them. So a lot of what we do, university ministry, is work to fight for the needs of our undocumented student community. We work with the unhoused population here in San Francisco. We look at ways to help globally as well, and understand what issues are out there that are affecting different communities. One thing that is very near and dear to my heart is to make sure that we are establishing a sense of welcome and belonging and inclusion for students that are not Christian, not Catholic, because my view is very pluralistic in the sense of, all traditions and all spiritualities. As long as you are working for good, you are all like wonderful and valid and should have a place. And so everything that we do in university ministry is about bringing that to light, including some of our liturgies and rituals. A lot of the prayers that we do is for social justice. And for me, what drives me kind of going back to the other question, but not really, is, at the core of my faith system, Jesus, who was a very real historical figure, whether you believe in him religiously or not, a real historical figure who fought for social justice, right? Who went against the politics of his time, who flipped tables to make a point. And so part of what I see as my job as someone who works at this intersection is to flip those tables, to continue to flip tables, to bring things to light, to work for justice, and along with that is making sure that as an institution we are acknowledging our own complicity in establishing systems of oppression.
Would anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I can go. For the second question, about like intersection between social justice and religious community, I have been interning recently with Unidos South OC, which is a faith-based nonprofit here in San Juan. And something that I saw growing up, and I think that all of my friends and our families have noticed, is that a couple years ago, the Mission Basilica got I think it's about like 40, 50 feet tall, like altar made out of like gold. And it was so crazy to see that like around that same time, like people experiencing homelessness was really on the rise in our own community. There still is a lot of poverty within our city. And so seeing that, and it's literally, the mission is right across the train tracks from one of the poorest communities in Orange County. So seeing that, like, we pass by this mission every day on our way to school or home or work, and kind of seeing that they don't do anything for the community. That's where like Unidos was really formed, and like with our like faith in God and our own like community, coming together and addressing the issues that have been ignored for so many years. I think a lot of it is like recently the Mission Basilica got rid of their Latinx ministry. They like completely shut the doors on them, like literally they changed the locks of like the Latinx like ministry room, and kind of just kicked them out, which was like I think pre-pandemic when this happened. So I think that really pushed us to like address the ways in which the mission has kind of just ignored the problems that the Latinx community has been facing in our own city. So I've been really excited to work with Unidos. I hadn't heard of them before. I think they started while I was up at USF. So being able to come home and work with them throughout the pandemic, especially, we were running like, what's it called? Food drives for different communities, even in like surrounding cities. So really like kind of like showing to the church like what should be done and kind of setting an example, hoping that later on they'll follow it and do the same. It's been interesting to see that they like haven't really provided any resources throughout the pandemic, but being able to fall back on Unidos has been really helpful throughout this time.
Alrighty. I really appreciate these responses. I'm grateful that you are all making an impact within your community groups. I know I've personally struggled to really find that community, but now I'm thinking maybe I'm looking simply in the wrong places. Moving on to the next question, it's definitely connected to this last question and to the second question. It is looking at an even bigger picture. Does your religion or spirituality uphold systems of oppression? How? And how have you seen your community combat that?
I just have a quick question. Upholds meaning that it supports, or it kind of like includes or has with it?
Yeah, or even like it knows about it but turns a blind eye to it, and lets it be.
Or even if historically, right, they have upholded the system and how they change that. Yeah.
Okay, so when you said that, what immediately came to my mind is in quite recent, not recent time, but historically recent times, um, especially Muslims in the developing countries, there's been this notion that women are not allowed to study, and there are clearly defined roles for women of just being at home and being a wife and X, Y, and Z. And religion is sort of like used as a blanket to put over all of this. Like even up until like recent times, we've had an actor, Indian actor, actress, I guess, and she quit because she was like, religion does not preach acting. So, I mean, all props to her for making her decision. Yes, granted that, but it nowhere does it say in the religion that women are not allowed to do jobs or study and learn. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad's wife, she was a businesswoman who the Prophet worked for, and that's how they got together. So if people are preaching that women are not supposed to be these leaders, these X, Y, and Z in these roles, these are sort of like systems. Again, this is the system talking, not the religion speaking, because we as people are not really, deeply studying a religion. We kind of rely on these systems and we trust these systems to tell us, to lead us in religion, but they often fail us because they set up a society that supports the system and not your spiritual growth. Um, so that's one thing that comes to my mind. I think women are kind of, I want to say all, and I don't want to speak to all of the experiences, but I do want to say that I think the system kind of like tells women that Islam doesn't, grant the permission for women to study or whatnot. One of the first universities in the world was started by a Muslim woman. The Prophet said that, if you had to get knowledge, even if it is in China, go and get it, because China was really, really far away from where the Prophet lived. So he was just sort of telling people that, hey, if you got to go to China, go and get, your studies, your knowledge. And in that tradition, in that hadith, in his words, he said, Muslim men and Muslim women, and he included both of them. And I think it also shows that perhaps because we don't put enough effort into studying our own religion and we sort of rely on these systems kind of like take advantage of that. And we are left to have this mindset of, because the religion says so, I can't do X, Y, and Z. So just wanted to say that.
So for mine, the short answer is yes, but it's obviously a little more complicated than that. I will start by saying that every religious tradition has some sort of spectrum, right, where people fall under. You have your conservatives and your liberals and liberal progressives, and people that are middle of the road, right? It's a lot like, unfortunately, the political parties, right? Again, we're talking about the system. The Catholic Church as a system, right, has been known historically to uphold systems of oppression. We can go as far back as the Inquisition and what was done there. right? That's really far back. We can go to slavery in this country. We can go to the treatment of the LGBTQIA community, how women are seen within the hierarchy of the church, or not seen within the hierarchy of the church, better said, right? But we are talking about the system as a whole, right? I like to look at the Catholic Church as like big C. We always talk about it like this: big C church, that's hierarchy. It's all the men at the top and the rules that they're putting together. And little c, which comes from the Greek word ecclesia, which means universal, right? That's where the people kind of fall under. If you look at the community of believers within the Catholic Church, and I will even broaden it a little bit to Christianity, you have folks that are working to combat these systems of oppression. You have the Jesuits, for example, who run USF, though not perfect, are one of the most liberal groups of clergy within the church. They have allowed me to preach at the church, right? We also have within university ministry groups specifically for LGBTQIA students. We have 2 members of clergy, one Jewish, one Catholic, who are open about their sexuality on campus, provide safe spaces for students. We have within the church as a whole, we have sisters that are working on the front lines of the working with the transgender communities in Latin America, where there is more oppression for them there, some working here. We have priests and other sisters that are working within the United States to really shed light on the oppression faced by the LGBTQ community. Jim Martin would be an example. He's a Jesuit priest who is trying to help the church and help Catholics understand how to be more welcoming to LGBTQIA believers, and to open doors. We have certain ministries that do that too, like New Ways Ministry. We have priests that are working to combat anti-Blackness, who are combating white supremacy, folks like Nicole Segura and Brian Massengale. So there are people in the church, little c church, right, that are trying to break down those systems of oppression. And we have Pope Francis at the top, who slowly is also trying to dismantle some of the structures while upholding others. But the Catholic Church moves at a snail's pace. And so change happens slowly. So yes, there is the oppression, but yes, people are working within these systems and these structures to try to dismantle it. And it's going to come from the bottom up, because essentially within Christianity, within the Catholic Church, rules are set in certain ways. Some are from the hierarchy and some by the population, which is a little known fact. But if the entire population agrees on one thing, the church is more inclined to change it. So that's how it's being combated.
I can answer a little bit of both sides of the religious and the spiritual. I think for the religious part, for the most part, y'all have already answered that. I think that there's little bits and pieces of like different people doing different work, and like the religious structure of like making sure that we recognize that, like, some religions have been founded on the base of like genocide of indigenous and native people, specifically talking about just like where I come from, right? And so I remember last year we had some kind of video that we were making, and there was a long list that had come out of like all the things that like we were acknowledging that has been a part of the Jesuit Catholic Church. And so one of them was like acknowledging that like the Jesuit people were also in charge of the genocide of Native and indigenous peoples. And so making sure that like we acknowledge the history of like the genocide and the trauma that like has come, right, is like super important, because it's not just about like doing the work, right, and like making the things change, but also saying, hey, like, yes, this happened, right, but how do we move forward? And so that has been one of the biggest things. And then I would say also not necessarily like upholding systems of oppression, but I have felt that like specifically in the Mexica tradition, in the Nahua Mexica tradition, where I do Aztec dancing, there can be like some feelings of like, if you're not Aztec or like Mexican, indigenous, native, like rooted, like, why are you doing this? Like, there's always like a lot of questioning of like people who aren't from our ethnicity or background. And so I do see that a lot, even within indigenous peoples, like, you know, are you from a reservation? Are you not? How indigenous are you? Like, just validating like our levels of like identifying with certain things. I feel like that has always been something that when I moved to a different city and I like start dancing with the new group, like I always want to make sure that I find a group that's inclusive of like all people, not only Mexicanos, but like also specifically like Central Americans, because at least in the Bay Area, like there was a lot. And so I remember when I moved to San Francisco, like I went to maybe like 4 different danza groups, and like I found one that was like super inclusive of like people who would say like, oh, like I'm from Guatemala or Honduras, and like I'm not Aztec, but I want to learn. And I remember that like grupo being like, yeah, like of course, like you're more than welcome to, like this prayer is for all of us. And so I would say that like for that side too, it's just like making sure that like we're not like, you know, it's not ours to keep, it's ours to share. And like the learnings and the teachings that there is in like danza spirituality is really just connected with like nature. And so like, who are we to say like we're the only ones that are entitled like to this specific like belief system? And so that's how I would answer that question.
I can share a bit about my experience in the Coptic Church. I definitely don't know enough. I'm not an expert on this, but just kind of from my perspective. I don't want to speak like generalize for the Christian community as a whole, but definitely within the Coptic Orthodox Church, it's very traditional. Like I said, rituals are very important. So kind of along with that is resistance to change, which unfortunately kind of coincides with leaders and people within the church upholding these systems of oppression, whether that be homophobic ideas or kind of coinciding with traditional gender roles and disempowering women and things like that. We definitely see a lot of. There are people that are combating it, but I would say just from my perspective, I'm not that involved at this point in my life. My involvement in the church is going to church with my mom when I'm home, kind of just to as a family activity. But just even stating that, you know, I accept Jesus as my Lord and I don't agree with those ideas, and that's not the way that I live my life, or those are not my beliefs, I think is big, because unfortunately, and it makes me sad to say, but I think a lot of times Christianity as a whole is kind of grouped in with these conservative and sometimes exclusive ideas. And it is such a bummer, because I think it draws people away, and it kind of gives a tainted idea of what we believe. So just even going against that and saying, I don't stand by that, but neither does my Lord. And like we were saying, like just reiterate what people were saying earlier about how there is the core of a religion, and then there are people within the religious systems, and those aren't always the same. And Jesus said, love thy neighbor, and he was an advocate for social justice, and I believe that in my heart, and that's the way that I choose to I guess accept my religion and live my life. And it might not coincide with what a lot of leaders in my church say, but I take from it what I believe in. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing again, everyone. I appreciate your sharing your experiences and looking into. I think it's important to like critique what we believe in, and like again question and try to find the right answer for us. And then so going on to the last question, because it can get so confusing, and you know, you start to question like, oh, these people can be so, you know, hateful or bad or whatever you might think, but you still want to hold on to religion, or you want to hold on to your faith, right? You do have faith. And like Michelle said, you do have faith in your savior, or whatever it may be. Do you have any advice for folks struggling with their religious identity, and what organizations, books, podcasts, etc. would you recommend to further understand that journey?
I don't think I have one like specific book, podcast, or anything that I can recommend. I would say read a lot and listen to a lot and explore a lot. I think that's one of the things that I really took from just being a part of a Jesuit Catholic institution, and just being able to like be surrounded by so many international students that have all these different like systems of belief for religion and spirituality. And that opened my own like view and world into like reading more and learning more and listening to other podcasts and listening to other people and being a part of different circles, and once in a while like being invited to like, you know, like their places of prayer and like understanding and learning. I think that the best advice that I can give is that you need to always be willing to learn and always wanting to learn, right? And so I would definitely like check out from like the whole spectrum of like religion and spirituality. And I would definitely say that like if you are struggling like with your own religious identity, I think everyone on this panel has like voiced that at some point, you know, like we've all been there. But I would say, you know, just as Michelle was saying too, right? Like I've come to accept that like I believe in like the Lord, right? And like what they stand for and like all these other stuff, you know, are in a different place, right? In a different category. And just like Sarah and Erika and Kanamir were saying the same thing about like the systems and things like that. It's okay to always question it, and it's okay to sometimes feel like icky about being a part of something. I know that I very constantly, like when I have like moments of like where my life is difficult and things like that, I am still the person that will like listen to Christian like worship music and Catholic worship music, and that makes me feel better. And I cry and I say like, God, please help me, and it makes me feel better. And then at the same time, like there's this guilt that quickly happens, like, oh no, like the church, and it's been bad to people, and especially to like queer people, and I'm a part of that. And it's like it's so quick to like switch that I have to like stop myself and be like, it's okay. Like it's okay to like feel some kind of comfort like when I pray, and some kind of comfort when I sing this music, and to also go and like light my sage and light my copal and like pray to Mother Earth and say thank you to the moon at night, you know, like it's okay to combine all of these things. And I will admit that very often I do have to like text Angelica and ask her to remind me that it's okay to embrace both, because like that guilt is so quick, like to switch for POC people, for BIPOC people, I think. But just like knowing that it's okay to like question it, and it's okay to be like like having the best of both worlds. It's totally not likable, but that's what came to my head right now. So I'll leave y'all with that piece of advice.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Erica. I just want to add to that, on top of everything that has been said. There's this beautiful saying in Islam about what God said to human beings. It reads, "I am as my servant thinks of me." So I think that when you are struggling with religion, I think you have to remember that it's about you and your relationship to the higher power that you believe in. I think even our struggle, I think, shows that we deeply care about this. We are deeply concerned about this. We want to be part of it, but we are just not able to make sense of it. I think at that point, you have to really think that whatever the system might be shitty, all these people that are running the religion right now might be shitty, but at the end of the day, what religion is your relationship with whatever you believe in. You know, people who think they're atheists, they also have sort of like a religion. They believe in that, you know, they believe in something beyond themselves, and that is their religion. So I think you have to remember that your religion, your God, is what you think of it, or him or her or they or they, what all the pronouns out there. You know, your God is what you think of God. So just remember that, and don't let other people define the rules and define your religion for you, because when you're going to follow that, it's not going to work out for you if you don't truly believe in that. You're always going to be sad or depressed, or it's not going to work out in the head.
I totally agree with what's been said so far. I always used to tell my students when I taught religion class that you could be spiritual and not religious. right? And you could be religious, but without spirituality, it becomes empty, right? Because at the core of any religious system is a personal belief in something, right? For Christianity, it's a personal relationship with God, right? And spirituality, because of its connection to something greater than yourself, becomes a way of life, right? So I always used to tell my students, it's great if someone considers themselves religious and they go through the motions and they go through the, they go through the rituals. But if they leave that church, or if they leave the synagogue or the mosque or the gurdwara or wherever it is that they're worshiping, and they go and they treat another human being in a really bad way, or they're not conducting themselves in a way that is loving toward other people, then there's no spirituality there. It's just become empty rules and rituals, right? I think about it sometimes. When I was growing up and I was going to Spanish mass, you always had these ladies that were constantly praying the rosary, and that was great. But sometimes they would leave the church and the first thing they would do was talk about people that were there. What are they wearing? Did you see that? Blah, 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 right? And so to me, it's like, yes, we could go through the rituals of the church and follow all these rules. And, for Catholics, for example, don't have, meat on Fridays and whatever, but what kind of human being are you? And that's where the spirituality comes in. So I kind of want to bring that forth because, I've heard a lot in today's discussion about, religion and spirituality. They can be merged. In fact, if you are a religious person and you are deeply connected to something greater than yourself, that's a spirituality piece, and it makes it so much fuller for you. So I would say that, and I would say also, don't be afraid to question, and don't allow people to tell you what it is that you should believe. You will only know what you believe if you ask the questions and live those questions and live your way into the answers, right? So that's another thing. I would say that for those of you who are Christian, there is a great blog and a great podcast called Evolving Faith, and it's for anybody who's grown up in any kind of Christian denomination, and it talks about deconstructing faith, and it's specifically geared towards folks that have experienced some sort of trauma within their church communities. So that's one. And I would also echo what Erica said in terms of read and learn about different traditions. Go to, I think it's getreligion.org. They really explore the truth of religion, because sometimes the media will totally twist what different traditions believe in, and you really want to know what that is. And the last thing I would say is please, please, please always remember that religion is part of the entire diversity, equity, and inclusion puzzle. It often gets left out. We talk about race, we talk about gender, we talk about sexuality, we talk about all kinds of intersections of identity, but people often leave religion out of it. And that is a problem, because oftentimes that causes us to look at religious institutions and religious identities as something that's negative and not positive. So please move forward in recognizing that it is part of DEI and it needs to be part of that conversation, whether it is at a private religious institution or a public institution. It is a part of people's identity, and it is important in understanding folks. So that's another thing that you can do.
If anyone has anything else to share, feel free to. This was our last question. So after this, we're going to move on to just opening up the space for the audience to ask questions and everything like that.
I just want to say one sentence, actually, after the one that I just said. I'm not going to go down that loophole. So what I want to say is, at the same time, I think it's important to not shut ourselves off from our systems and other systems and what is going on in the world, because I think we are all part of it. I feel like we are all part of it. Yeah, it's very important to just be, I don't want to say involved, but just to know, to talk to people, and don't shut other people that might have an opposite understanding of what Catholicism means or what Islam means, or, because we might learn something, and we might also teach somebody else and inspire them to be on our journey. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that sentence. But yeah, if anyone has questions, our audience numbers did dwindle down a little bit because people had other responsibilities or class. But if the people here might have any questions, or if there's anything else panelists might want to share. I did get a question in the chat, and they said, as a child of immigrants, it's difficult to have conversations about religion with my family. They feel most comfortable not changing because that is what they brought from home. Can these conversations become easier? Is there a better approach? And I can paste that. I'm gonna see if I can paste it.
I honestly came to the conclusion that that's never gonna change. Unfortunately, I just feel like I for a long time always like try to like change the conversation and challenge and just be like, come on, like we should be, seeing things a little bit different. I am also a child of immigrants, also identify as documented from Mexico, and so I understand like the ties that like we have as immigrants to our religion, especially like for people who have been here for years, right? Like I feel like one of the reasons maybe like why my family is so tied to like religion is because that is the one thing that didn't change in migrating to the US. I think that was the one constant that didn't have to change, and where they were able to find community when they came to the States. I feel like language and work, the work field and the school field and all the other places where we have to exist when we come to this country have to change, right? And we have to adapt to those things. But when it came to religion, I felt like that was the piece for a lot of my family members. And so it took me a long time to not like be resentful in that, and understanding that like that is their comfort, right? And that is their home, and that is their piece of where they come from, right? Of their native land. And so just being understanding of that and accepting of that, and knowing also like how to set certain boundaries, right? And so I know I had a really difficult time like when I was an undergrad, because I was like that Chicana feminist that was like coming out and questioning like religious to the very max, to the point where it was like, please like stop talking sometimes. But now I think that like I'm at a place where my family like understands that I'm a little bit of like, both things. And like, yes, of course, like there's always jokes about like me praying to the moon and stuff like that. But I've also come to a place where it's like, I know that like those jokes don't come from a bad place, right? It comes from a place of like not understanding and like only knowing like one way of like knowing religion and spirituality. And so just like being honest. I remember recently for my birthday, I think it was this year or last year, my mom gave me a ring of the Virgen de Guadalupe. And when I opened it, like I smiled because she gave it to me, right? But at the same time, like I'm not religious, and my mom knows this. And so she noticed my face, and she told me if I wanted to exchange it, that she had also seen another one that was like a heart with an Xfinity sign. And so she's like, I know that you're not religious, and so like if that's what you want. And so that was a moment of like, okay, like she understands, but at the same time, like I could tell that she was kind of sad. But we came to a place where we're both able to like just coexist in the fact that like we don't believe in 100% the same thing. But it's okay, right? Like I am not like fully saying that like God doesn't exist. And so for her to like understand that I'm also not, in that like term, I think has been like the best way that I can navigate it. So just like accepting and being able to adapt and like understand that like our immigrant parents come from that place, and it's not from a place of harm.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to that. Especially when I was like first questioning my own religion, and like I don't want to say like made the mistake of mentioning it to my mom, but it kind of was a mistake because I just got this whole lecture. Like, it wasn't even her trying to see where I was coming from. It was like, no, this is what we believe. This is what's true. This is what has been taught to us and like passed down to us through generations. Which was really interesting because my grandma was more open to like those conversations than my mom was. But it's hard because it is like the religion that they brought from their like hometowns and stuff. My mom is from like Aguascalientes, and so the chapels there, like she always talks about like just she was like lived blocks from them and would walk to church, and that's what she like was brought up in, and that's what like she's known and carries from Mexico. So it's really difficult. I think for me now, I just like try to like bring it up in like smaller conversations, and then once I see it's not going anywhere, I was like, okay, we'll end here and pick it up later. And then I think I also do like my own research on ways that I can kind of let her know like where my perspective is coming from, not really like confronting her or arguing, but just kind of having like a moment where like I can teach her something new or something that I've learned, and then just having those conversations slowly, which obviously they're not going to be open to like drastic change, but I think once you like take the time to go about it in a slower manner, they might be a little bit more open to understanding, or they might not. Like you really never know, especially with immigrant parents. Like you don't know how they're going to react to certain things, but it's a difficult conversation to have, but I think it's definitely worthwhile to put in the effort and to try to learn from one another too.
Just gonna say one more thing on top of everything. I think it's very important also to not give up on your parents, and just be like, oh, that's just the way they are, leave them, they're gonna just go to hell. No, I think it's just important to just stick with them. And I also I have been very successful at just subtly, as Sarah said, when you have a logical conversation in a not attitude manner, in a non-attitude manner, your parents do listen. When you have that subtly bringing them and just making them aware of, okay, this is the injustice that is being done in the system that we believe in, whereas the religion that you believe, mom, tells you this, because more often than not, our parents, again, are having that same battle. They believe in the religion and they confuse religion with religious systems, because all of us are, voila, I have, taken so many classes and gone to universities. Our thought processes and minds may be more, inclined to see those things, whereas my parents, who haven't been to college, they're not going to see that. So just subtly having that conversation and knowing that this doesn't divide them, right? This doesn't separates me from them, but just thinking out loud with them about these issues can help.
We do have another question in the chat. I'm just going to repeat it just so it's in the recording. As staff professionals who support student well-being and bring programming and services to campus, how can we support students who are navigating these tough conversations with friends and families?
I can answer that a little bit. I'm new here at Cal Poly. Well, it's been 6 months, but I still feel pretty new because it's all been virtual. So it's been difficult to build conversations and understand where students are with this topic. So the very little that I do understand really comes from creating this wellness panel and getting to hear Natalie and Sandra tell me their stories and just like the stories of their friends. And so I think that as staff members at Cal Poly, what we can do is create more spaces like this one, and where we can bring people from like different religious and spirituality backgrounds to like really come and have conversations where it's okay to like question and it's okay to like have this difficult conversations. I don't know necessarily what the climate is at Cal Poly around religion and spirituality and how open we are. But I am a CSU alumni, so I graduated from Cal State Channel Islands back in 2018, I think it was. But I know that while I was at Cal State Channel Islands, it was really difficult to like find a religious space that wasn't white and heteronormative and cis. I remember I tried to be part of like the Catholic group, and like it just felt like very like different because everything was in English, and that's not how I learned a lot of like my prayers. I tried to be a part of like Christian Varsity, and that also felt like a place where like it just wasn't right. And that's how I ended up like in Danza Azteca, because it was just like it was in my native tongue and it was things that I was able to understand, but I felt like I had to like compromise, right? Like that part of me, because I couldn't have like that space where other people identified the same way that I did. And so I think that the best thing that we could do as staff members at Cal Poly is create more spaces like this one. And I know that Natalie and Sandra will have some resources at the end for Cal Poly area, but I know Sam from Pride Center as well has done some work around like religious and spirituality. And so I would definitely like collaborate with the people who are already doing that work at Cal Poly, because I'm sure that there is people who are doing that work already at Cal Poly. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. If anybody else on the panel wants to answer.
Yeah, I would say what you can, so exactly what Erica said, you know, having more events, but I think just listening, listening and being that support for someone, because sometimes having conversations such as this with friends, with family members is difficult. So if they're coming to you, it's because they want someone to listen, and it's not always about advice, right? It's about listening. And I think just reassuring anybody that first, like I've said before, you know, questioning is okay, but also reassuring them that, you know, what is personal to you is okay, right? Your personal connection with the divine, or if someone happens to come up to you and say, I'm either atheist, agnostic, or indifferent, we want to make sure that I say that that's okay too, right? But to give folks the space to do that in an authentic way, allow them to bring their authentic selves, and tell them that it's okay. Ultimately, whatever it is that we believe individually. How we choose to express that comes collectively. And sometimes that individual belief system might not gel with what we grew up with or the people in our lives. But, you know, as long as you provide students an opportunity to explore it and talk about it, I think that's one of the first things that you can do. And in terms of how to navigate those conversations, you know, they can be difficult, but as long as you're providing resources for folks and to how to go into those conversations, not in a combative way, but more in a, this is what I believe, this is who I am, that's not changing kind of thing. You know, that could be one way of supporting.
I just want to add one more thing. Not only questioning is okay, I believe questioning is your right. Because you, my love, are a precious piece of cake. And when you are becoming part of a system, you're giving yourself to that system, right? And when you are giving such an important and precious you to something, it is very important that that stuff makes sense to you, right? When we select a university to attend and stuff, we always make sure that the finances make sense, X, Y, and Z make sense, you know, all these things make sense, and then we attend, right? So with religion, with anything, it's very important to make sure that it makes sense. So in order to make sense, it's very important for you to ask questions.
We promise we're not recruiting anybody to attend USF for graduate school, but if it's in your radar, please feel free to reach out to any of us.
And if you want to be a resident minister, I'm recruiting.
We very much appreciate USF people being here right now. I knew the plug was gonna come. Yeah, but I don't know if anyone else in the audience, you only have 2 members right now, but if anyone else in the audience has questions, if not, we are going to end here. Just thank you everyone for coming, both audience members and panelists. We very much appreciate everything that was said here today. Before we go, we are gonna, like Erica said, Sandra and I are gonna compile a list of resources and share that with everyone. And also email an assessment that we hope you all fill out just to let us know how we did. But that's pretty much it for today. Thank you everyone again